Today, we are diving into two, well, really extraordinary federal actions from the Trump administration that, on the surface, seem to have nothing to do with each other. We're talking about a super high-stakes situation right here on U.S. soil, and at the same time, a pretty wild ambition on the world stage. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the crisis brewing in Minnesota. Then we need to talk about something called the Insurrection Act. It's super important here. After that, we'll see how things played out on the ground in Minneapolis. And then we're going to pivot to this surprising foreign policy goal involving Greenland. And finally, we'll tie it all together and figure out, what's the big picture.
All right, so let's set the scene. Our story really kicks off in Minneapolis. Protests were getting more and more intense, the whole city was on edge, and the federal government was about to make a move that would ramp up the tension big time. And this is the number that really got everyone's attention, 1,500. Officials told ABC News that 1,500 active-duty Army paratroopers from the 11th Airborne Division were put on alert. And for what? For a possible deployment right into an American city. And just to be clear, we're not talking about the National Guard here. This is the active-duty U.S. Army.
Now listen to the official language they used to justify this. An official said, "We are taking prudent steps. We are preparing options." It sounds so routine, right? Prudent steps, preparing options. But the action itself, getting active duty troops ready to deploy inside the U.S., is anything but routine. It's a huge deal.
So why were they even thinking about this? Well, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was all happening right after President Trump threatened to use a really powerful and very rarely used law, the Insurrection Act.
So what exactly is this Insurrection Act they were talking about? Let's take a quick look at this law, which has actually been around since 1807.
Okay, so here it is. The Insurrection Act basically gives the president the power to deploy the U.S. military inside the United States to put down civil disorder or rebellion. I mean, this is a massive step. It totally bypasses the normal rules that prevent the military from being used as a domestic police force.
All right, so let's get back to what was actually happening on the ground in Minneapolis. You've got this tension brewing between local leaders and this growing federal presence. So how did that actually look?
Well, it was like two different worlds colliding. On the federal side, you had this big surge of ICE and Border Patrol agents, so many that they reportedly outnumbered local police. The Justice Department launched an investigation into the mayor and the governor, and of course you had that threat of active duty troops hanging over everything. And the local reaction? Well, the mayor flat out called the ICE surge an invasion. Protesters against the federal presence were way bigger than any counter-protests. And get this, the Minnesota National Guard said if they were called in, they'd wear bright yellow vests, specifically so people wouldn't confuse them with the federal agents. And this wasn't just seen as a political squabble. People were genuinely alarmed. ABC's chief Washington correspondent Jonathan Karl put it in really blunt terms. He said, "It is extraordinary. It is dangerous." That tells you just how serious this standoff was becoming. Now, you'd think that would be enough drama, right? But at the very same time all of this was happening at home, a completely different and honestly an equally shocking story was taking shape on the world stage. So what was it? Yep, you're seeing that right, Greenland. The administration had become dead set on this really unconventional goal, buying the world's largest island, which, is an autonomous territory of Denmark. And if you're thinking, oh, that was probably just an off-the-cuff remark, think again. A source close to the president told ABC News that he was dead serious about acquiring Greenland, and that it was something he was extremely focused on. So this wasn't just some passing fancy. It was a real, top-level priority. So you can imagine, this whole idea didn't exactly go over well with our allies. This dead serious goal reportedly truly alarmed European nations. And it got even more tense when the administration started threatening to use tariffs as leverage to get what they wanted. And this was all happening right as the Supreme Court was about to rule on whether other tariffs the administration had put in place were even constitutional. Okay, so military on alert in Minnesota and a push to buy Greenland. What on earth do these two things have in common? They seem like they're from different universes, but there is a common thread that connects these two really extraordinary stories. When you zoom out, it all comes down to one big idea: unilateral action. Think about it. Both of these events were what you'd call extraordinary uses of federal power. Both of them really pushed back against established norms, both at home and abroad. They created these direct standoffs, one with state leaders in Minnesota, the other with our allies in Europe.
And at their core, both showed a real focus on using the power of the executive branch to just get things done, no matter how much friction it caused.
And that really leaves us with this big, lingering question. Both of these situations were defended as just decisive action, prudent steps at home and serious goals abroad. But it makes you wonder, when do actions like these cross a line? When do they go from being just assertive policy to something that actually challenges the very systems, both domestic and international, that they're supposed to be working within? That's really the question at the heart of both of these stories.